This is Mission Control Houston. Good morning. We are live here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the NASA Johnson Space Center here in Houston, Texas, awaiting the release of the Cygnus cargo vehicle for Orbital ATK's OA-5 mission. Today is Monday, November 21st, 2016. Right now we are on track for a scheduled release at 7:20 a.m. Central Time. Flight controllers now undergoing a no-go, no-go review for the release in just about 20 minutes here. The cargo vehicle is now in its release position at the end of the station's robotic arm, just about 50 feet away from the station. Disposable weight now is weighing at just over 1.5 tons or 1,400 kilograms. Now in the cupola workstation aboard the International Space Station, NASA astronaut Shane Kimbrough and European Space Agency astronaut Thomas Pesquet at the controls in the cupola workstation, awaiting for the command at 7:20 a.m. Central Time this morning to release the Cygnus cargo vehicle from the station. Once the cargo vehicle is released from the station, it'll be encountering a little bit of a different flight plan afterwards, again at 7:20 a.m. Central Time. Flight controllers now confirming here in Mission Control Houston, go for release scheduled at 7:20 a.m. Central Time. Once it does release at 7:20, just a minute afterwards, it will begin its departure burn and attitude maneuver. This is a 3-minute burn. We'll go from 7:21 a.m. to 7:24 a.m. After this, it'll begin, a couple hours later, it'll begin to actually raise its orbit on board. In addition to the 1.5 tons of disposal cargo is also an experiment and CubeSats that will be deployed from a higher altitude, actually 62 miles higher than the International Space Station orbit. It'll begin raising its orbit later today, 11:13 a.m. Central Time, and begin 2 more burns later this week on Friday, November 25th. One at 11:54 a.m. Central Time, and another at 12:41 p.m. Central Time. This will be to raise its orbit for 2 deployments of NanoRack lemur satellites that control monitoring and ships across the world, monitoring especially in remote areas of the oceans. Once it has raised its orbit to about 100 kilometers or 62 miles of a higher orbit than the International Space Station, not directly above it, but at a higher altitude, it'll begin 2 deployments of 4 satellites, one at 3:05 p.m. Central Time on November 25th, that's later this week on Friday, and another at 6:10 p.m. Central Time. In addition to the deployments on Friday, also later today at 12:30 p.m. Central Time, an experiment called Sapphire 2 will begin, and data downloads will begin a few days after that, continue all day on November 22nd, tomorrow, Tuesday, and possibly into the 23rd. Sapphire is a spacecraft fire experiment, and this is a continuation from the last Sapphire experiment on the OA-6, Cygnus OA-6 mission. That Sapphire 1 experiment was a large 1 foot by 3 foot sample cotton and fiberglass blend. This will be 9 samples of 9 different materials, a bit smaller than this 1 foot by 3 foot, only a couple centimeters across. And it'll begin this at 12:30 p.m. Central Time and continue the data download all day on the 22nd and possibly into the 23rd. This spacecraft fire experiment will continue throughout the week. Then the NanoRack deployment of the lemur satellites will be conducted on Friday, the 25th, after raising its orbit to about 62 miles above the International Space Station. 2 days later, it will begin its deorbit burn on November 27th, Sunday. And then it will be deorbited into the Earth's atmosphere, begin its fiery reentry just over the Pacific Ocean, right now scheduled for 5:30 p.m. on Sunday. Flight controllers communicating with the Orbital ATK Cygnus control room in Dulles, Virginia right now. Visiting vehicle officer today here in Mission Control Houston is Jerry Yancheris. Right now you're getting a look at the end of the station's robotic arm. This is a view from the inside of the International Space Station. A workstation called the Cuckoo gives telemetry data as the Cygnus is positioned just in its release position 50 feet away from the International Space Station. The station now flying about 256 statute miles over the west coast of, just approaching the west coast of California. We're about to see an orbital sunrise here at about 7:09 or 7:10, probably closer to 7:10 a.m. Central Time. The Cygnus cargo vehicle and the station's robotic arm will begin to light up a little bit more, and we'll get a clear view of the Cygnus cargo vehicle now in its release position. Here in Mission Control Houston leading the teams. The Orbit 1 team here today is Flight Director Gary Horlocker. Next to him at the Flight Director console, Rick Henfling. Just behind there at the top of your screen is the Capcom Rebecca Wingfield, the voice from the controllers here in Mission Control, and the crew members aboard the International Space Station, now Expedition 50 crew members.
Station Houston on 2 for Cygnus. Prepare for release per step 1.5 and 1.320. The release window opens at 1320, that's 1320 GMT, and closes at 1358, 1358 GMT. Let us know when you've completed your review and briefing.
Copy Houston, 1320 to 1328, 1358 I think you said. We are complete with the briefing.
1320 to 1358, that's a good readback.
Copy.
That was Capcom Rebecca Wingfield talking with NASA astronaut Shane Kimbrough, now in the cupola workstation. Next to him, European Space Agency astronaut Thomas Pesquet at the controls, ready to release the Cygnus cargo vehicle. You heard that the window opened at 7:20 p.m. This is the target release time, 7:20 a.m. Central Time this morning. There's been quite a bit of traffic in space over the last month, starting with the launch of the Cygnus cargo vehicle on Monday, October 17th. This was at 6:45 p.m. on top of the Orbital ATK's upgraded Antares 230 rocket. It launched from the Mid-Atlantic Regional Spaceport, or MARS, at NASA's Wallops Flight Facility in Virginia, with over 2.5 tons of, or just under 2.5 tons of food, supplies, and experiments launching to the station. After launch on Monday the 17th, capture was 5.5 days later. This was to make room for a Soyuz launch that happened just a few days later. Expedition 49 crew members at the time, Shane Kimbrough, Sergei Ryzhikov, and Andrei Borensenko launched on 3:05 a.m. Central Time Wednesday, October 19th. In the window while Cygnus was awaiting its 5.5-day rendezvous, this Soyuz crew of Kimbrough, Rizikov, and Borisenko docked at 4:52 a.m. Central Time on Friday, October 21st. This allowed some time for Cygnus to later be captured at 6:28 a.m. Central Time on October 23rd. It was captured by Expedition 49 crew members Takuya Onishi and Kate Rubens, operating from the Cupola workstation, now where Shane Kimbrough and Thomas Pesquet are stationed now. Thomas Pesquet is part of the new Soyuz crew that just docked about 2 days ago, along with NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson and Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Novitzky. They launched on 2:20 p.m. Central Time on Thursday, November 17th. That was this past Thursday. This is on top of a Soyuz MSO-3 spacecraft. They had a 2-day rendezvous to the station and docked this past Saturday, 3:58 p.m. Central Time, Saturday, November 19th. Hatches were opened later at 6:40 p.m. to welcome the new crew. They are beginning their first workday aboard the International Space Station now. Thomas Pesquet starting his workday at the Cupola workstation now, ready for the release of the Cygnus cargo vehicle at 7:20 a.m. Central Time. Before the addition of the new Expedition 50 members, the Expedition 49 crew members undocked from the International Space Station on October 29th, 7:35 p.m. Central Time, landed just about 3 hours later in Zhezkazgan, 10:58 p.m. Central Time the same day, completing 115 days in space. This was the Expedition 49 crew of NASA astronaut Kate Rubens, Roscosmos cosmonaut Anatoly Ivanishin, and JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi. Now getting a good view of the Cygnus cargo vehicle as the sun begins to rise here. The station now 253 statute miles, passing over the west coast of Mexico now.
Station on 2 for Cygnus. Go to check Cygnus configuration per step 1 and 1.602, Cygnus departure monitoring.
Roger, Houston, we copy.
Flight controllers and the crew in the Cupola workstation now going through the procedure, still on track for a 7:20 a.m. Central Time release of the Cygnus cargo vehicle from the station. release of the Cygnus still on track for 7:20 a.m., just about 4 minutes here. Right after release, about a minute afterwards, we'll start the departure burn. This is a 3-minute burn to get away from the station, safely away from the station. This will take us out of the keep-out sphere, which is about 200 meters away from the station.
Completed block 1 of 1.602, and we're ready for 2 of decimal 1, step 2 of 1.320.
Copy, your review is complete. Stand by for release.
Copy.
Okay, station, you are go for Cygnus release on time at 13:20 GMT, steps 2 through 4 in 1.320. The release window closes at 13:58 GMT.
Copy, we go for release at 1320, starting at 1320.
That's a good readback.
Confirmation from the crew up on the station now. They've completed the review and are on track for a release at 7:20 a.m. Central Time. The International Space Station now 251 statute miles, about to approach the west coast, just off the west coast of Guatemala. Now just under a minute until release of the Cygnus cargo vehicle.
Houston Station, the release has been commanded.
Copy that. We're following along.
The command has been given for release, standing by. And that is a confirmed release of the Cygnus cargo vehicle on Orbital ATK's OA-5 mission, 7:22 a.m. Central Time, over the Pacific Ocean, just west off the coast of Colombia, 251 statute miles above the Earth. Cargo vehicle now 1.5 meters away, burn about to commence shortly. Cygnus 4 meters away now. Cygnus now 4.5 meters away. You can see the Ultraflex solar arrays now from the camera of the end of the station's robotic arm. And that's the beginning of the departure burn, now at 7:25 a.m. Central Time.
Departure burn is in progress. Continue to monitor departure, steps 2 and 3, and 1.602.
Station copies.
Confirmation from Capcom Rebecca Wingfield that the departure burn has started. This burn is scheduled to be just about 3 minutes long. And this will take the Cygnus out of the keep-out sphere 200 meters away from the station. Confirmation from flight controllers that the departure burn looks nominal. Cygnus cargo vehicle drifting further and further away from the station as the International Space Station passes 252 statute miles above the west coast of Peru. Confirmation from ground controllers here that the departure burn is now complete.
And Station Houston on 2 for Cygnus. We need you to command the arm in the positive Y direction to zero out before we get into the safing.
Confirmation that Cygnus has now passed the 200 meter mark. This is the keep out sphere, now safely away from the station.
Good, so you can safe the SSRMS per step 5 in 1.320.
Copy, step 5.
And Station, I can also tell you Cygnus has exited the 200 meter keep out sphere.
Copy that, Houston. I want to say thanks to the Orbital ATK and NASA teams. It was a really great mission. ISS received over 5,000 pounds of equipment, supplies, and payloads, which put the station in great shape. It's an honor for our crew to work with this Cygnus flight, especially since it was dedicated to our colleague Alan Poindexter. From the Expedition 50 crew, thank you again to all the people who made this flight such a huge success.
And those are great words, Shane. We really appreciate it, and it was really great working with you guys on this one today. And we'll finish out, and things are looking good so far.
Great news. Thanks.
Some congratulatory words from Shane Kimbrough now in the cupola workstation aboard the International Space Station as the Cygnus cargo vehicle safely exits the keep out sphere 200 meters away from the station. Kimbrough mentioned that this mission, Cygnus Orbital ATK's 085 mission, is dedicated to Alan Poindexter. Alan Poindexter is the veteran of 2 space flights, STS-122 aboard Atlantis, launched in February 7th, 2008, completed its mission February 20th. This was a mission that delivered the European Space Agency's Columbus module to the International Space Station. His second flight was STS-131 aboard Discovery, launched April 5th and lasted to April 20th, 2010. This was a resupply mission that brought the new crew sleeping quarters that the crew uses today, as well as 3 scientific experiment racks. Cygnus now becoming just a faint dot from this view here at the Cuckoo workstation aboard the International Space Station. Confirmation that the Cygnus will depart the approach ellipsoid here in just about 10 minutes, where the space station will no longer be able to send communication to the International Space Station, or to the Cygnus cargo vehicle. Cygnus will continue to drift away from the International Space Station for the next few hours. At 11:13 a.m. Central Time, scheduled for today, is the first orbit raising. This is to raise its orbit to about 100 kilometers, or about 62 miles higher than the altitude of the International Space Station, to set up for NanoRack CubeSat deployments of a few lemur satellites on November 25th later this week. The first orbit raising will be 11:13 a.m. Central Time today. Two more orbit raisings are scheduled for Friday, the 25th, the first at 11:54 a.m. Central Time, the next at 12:41 p.m. Central Time. That'll allow the Cygnus cargo vehicle to be at its 100 kilometers higher than ISS orbit, or about 62 miles, just over 300 statute miles above the Earth, to begin two sets of deployments on Friday the 25th, one at 3:05 p.m. Central Time, the next at 6:10 p.m. Central Time. Also later today, the Sapphire experiment will be conducted at 12:30 p.m. Central Time. This is called the Spacecraft Fire 2 experiment, to test fires aboard spacecraft and how to suppress them, and how materials burn in space. The first was conducted aboard the Cygnus OA6 mission. This one, on the OA5 mission departure, has 9 samples, a bit smaller than the sample aboard the first Sapphire mission. That was 1 foot by 3 foot. These are just a few centimeters across. 9 long samples of 9 different materials. That'll be conducted at 12:30 p.m. Central Time later today. Then the data download will begin at the first ground pass and continue all day tomorrow on Tuesday, possibly into the 23rd, Wednesday. The International Space Station, now 257 statute miles just east off the coast of Argentina. Cygnus cargo vehicle safely away from the International Space Station, just past the Keep Out Sphere, 200-meter mark away from the International Space Station at 7:29 a.m. We had confirmed release of the Cygnus cargo vehicle at 7:22 a.m. Central Time. This was over the Pacific Ocean, just west off the coast of Colombia, 251 statute miles above the Earth. The first departure burn began at 7:25 a.m. Central Time. The OA5 mission will have a little bit of a different portfolio before it re-enters the Earth, scheduled for Sunday, November 27th, beginning its destructive re-entry over the Pacific Ocean. The Cygnus cargo vehicle and the 1.5 tons of cargo aboard will burn up over the Pacific Ocean at about 5:30 p.m. Central Time on Sunday, November 27th. NASA TV will not provide live coverage of this event. In the meantime, as Cygnus continues to depart, it'll begin its first orbit raising at 11:13 a.m. Central Time today. The next two are scheduled for Friday the 25th. This is to raise its orbit to deploy some NanoRack CubeSats, part of the lemur satellites that monitor ships and weather as they cross the oceans around the world. This is part of a larger satellite constellation now. Those deployments are set to begin in the afternoon of Friday the 25th. The Cygnus cargo vehicle itself will be positioned at a higher altitude than the International Space Station, just over 300 statute miles above the Earth, about 62 miles higher than the orbit of the International Space Station. That's scheduled to begin on Friday the 25th, but that's 2 days before it starts its re-entry deorbit burns on Sunday the 27th. Also later today, right after its first orbit raising at 11:13 a.m. Central Time, the Sapphire experiment will begin at 12:30 p.m. Central Time. This is the spacecraft fire experiment to test how different materials burn in space. There's a rack right aboard Cygnus right now containing 9 samples of different materials, and it will test how those samples burn. Data downloads will begin at the first ground pass and continue all day tomorrow. Again, the successful release of the Cygnus cargo vehicle on its OA-5 mission at 7:22 a.m. Central Time today, just over the Pacific Ocean, west off the coast of Colombia, 251 statute miles above the Earth. That's the successful completion of the OA-5 mission aboard the International Space Station. And it'll begin its re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere at November 27th. Flight controllers switching over control of the Cygnus cargo vehicle to the flight controllers in Orbital ATK Cygnus control room in Dulles, Virginia. That'll complete operations here in Mission Control Houston at the NASA Johnson Space Center. That'll conclude the Orbital ATK's OA-5 mission, the successful release of the Cygnus cargo vehicle. This is Mission Control Houston.